Okay, guys, we'll get ready in just a moment here. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. All right, there we go. Hey, Christian, you there?
I'm here, Tim. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, perfect, I can. And man, I'm sorry that on the slide, I had gone in here and did something to make that number 11. I thought I just side clicked and I order. Is that it? No. Something I did here. Restart numbering from 12. Aha, there it is.
Ah, perfect.
Sorry.
I was wondering how to do that. So learn something new every day.
Oh, I forgot. I just did that the one time. I haven't done that before. You're good with that list?
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome. All right, guys. Well then, let's go ahead and get started here. I know people will kind of jump on just a second here. So it's breakfast time at the Vreeland household, and I just fed everybody. So now I lock the door here. Just a second. Let me share my screen sharing. I thought I was sharing my screen already. All right, you guys are able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go do this. All right. Okay, so today, Christian and I, we're kind of talking about what we think we need in our teams here, kind of what may be holding some people back. And this is probably one of the things that we feel like they are. Last week, I hope that you took good notes, and I have the spreadsheet, or at least the Google sheet that has all, or the Google Doc that has all the methods that you can go in and to implement into your business so that you can go and find more properties. So today, I thought that we'd go over this, which is how you can find money for your real estate transactions. And it's kind of funny if you've ever seen like if you've ever tried to look for money for people to help yourself even fund the education. These are some absolutely good creative methods that you can also look for that, so that you can start learning and growing and getting your mind sharper, so that you can go in and take down more deals. But I thought we'd go ahead and go into this. But here are a lot of methods we thought we'd go through here. A little bit here. Some of these we already know. Some of these maybe not so familiar. But as we go through here, let's see. Some of the things that I thought that I'd go back. In fact, when I first started, my very first year in Renatus, there were two methods that I used to purchase properties. One of them was my own home that I was looking for a rental. And I felt like the easiest way to buy to purchase a rentals especially for long term, like one of the best ones is using a traditional mortgage for a traditional mortgage bank that in that states as long as the numbers work. And right now that home that I have, it's right now 100% it's a HELOC, and so I don't have to worry about a mortgage on it. But that's how I started. So that is kind of the easiest way. It's the most secured in terms of interest rate. It's the lowest interest rate that you'd be able to find. So that's number one. And as well as, we're going to kind of go into that, but subject twos is another where it's other people's traditional mortgages. But traditional mortgages are pretty good method if you have time and you're choosy and you're able to get a good price and numbers work. Of course, cash. If you have your own cash, the other thing is other people's cash, which kind of goes into some other things, is going to be the quickest way to buy anything and the least headache. So the first deal was traditional. The second, my second property that I purchased, and my second and third that year, was with hard money. And when I say hard money, I had a little bit of money myself, but the hard money covered everything, 100% purchase, and also 100% of our fix and flips money, so our rehab money. And so, but that was not cheap, as many of you know. At that time, I paid about 5 points and 15%. I felt like that was a good trade-off because I didn't have to come up with any of my own money in order to do this deal. Right now, I have a lot more contacts where I don't need to pay interest rates like that ever again. But it was a good learning experience on that part. In terms, if you are in, let me just kind of go into this slide right here. So in terms of hard money, there are, I think a lot of people who are watching this will know that hard money is very short term, 3, 6, 9 months is how long they are. And they're traditionally 2 points, 12%, but they don't cover full purchase. I don't know really of anybody, except for maybe one person that I know, that it definitely depends on the deal, that won't lend more than 100% at those rates, or 75 to 90%. I know somebody who will be able to lend 100%, but does not feel comfortable lending everything. But they can also close quick, 24 hours to 5 days, give or take. And the best strategies those are for, of course, are quick transactions. You're in, you're out within a short amount of time, within 3, 6, 9 months. Most of those being fix and flips. Of course, you might be able to do like a double close on like a wholesale, where you just need quick money so that you can buy it, so you can record, and so that you can do whatever you need to do in the middle part, a couple weeks to a month, in order to pass it along to somebody else. Like I've done one where I want, like in some situations where that might be something where you're trying to take care of, is if you have a lender, you need to close on a property, the seller wants to. The seller says, you know what, you have to buy it from me within 5 days or something like that. Then you say, okay, great, I'll hurry and buy it from him, and then I'm going to go and refinance it into my own thing. You do want some money on the backside, because when you refinance it with a traditional or whatever, what have you, they're going to want to have a whatever you purchased it for. They're only going to lend you anywhere between up to 80%, 85%. And so that's one way that I've looked into purchasing, especially for some of these like wholesale deals where they are like duplex, fourplex, or multifamily properties. That's definitely some things that I've looked into. But hard money, so with in and out transactions, where you're planning on only using that money for just a short period of time. And so if we go here, as you're looking for how to take down a deal, these are questions you need to ask yourself. And that is, first of all, what is your time frame for the transaction? You might even, and I probably should add this on here too, but you got to think about what strategies, actually, no, I'm sorry, it's on there, yeah. What strategies that you're going to be using on this property. And also you got to think about, who do you want in a debt position? How much equity are you willing to give out? And also, with all that, you want to have that all during the negotiations. You want to also be prepared, actually, as you're negotiating, to have this all in mind, as well as you want to keep in mind about your relationships and who you're going to bring in, who do you want to bring into the deal, and what have you. But let's see, as we go on here. And please, if anybody has any questions, please come in and chime in. Let's make sure that we get everybody taken care of. And let me see here. Okay, I'm going to keep going here, but you know what? I don't see much people. I'm going to send another reminder on here to tell people to jump on the call. Christion, would you mind going in and talking a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, so as you're over there sending out that reminder, let me just kind of lay this out, because there's a lot of things, people, that you guys are not necessarily thinking about. I know some of you guys are watching the recording of this, and there's certain things that we want to keep in mind. And Tim, is there actually, I'll just share my screen. And then
Perfect.
I can pull up that same list. So let me get over here, share my screen. And we'll pull up this same list here. So, all right. So again, there's things that people just overlook. They don't think about. And you want to make sure that as you're getting into real estate, you think about all your options. And I'm not just talking about now. You know, some of you are new, but I want you to think long term. And we kind of built this list based off of that, of, you know, thinking about where you at now, what are you preparing yourself for as far as funding your real estate transactions, and what is that long term, right? What are you going to be doing long term as far as strategy is concerned? And that's one thing that Tim talked about on that last slide was, you know, keeping in mind your time frame, your strategy that you're using, who you're bringing in a debt versus equity position. So cash, I know it's obvious, but some people don't think about the cash that they may have set aside for something else. You know, I've oftentimes talked to people and they're like, well, I've got that cash set aside for, you know, putting down on our own home. But the plan for that is, you know, 6 or 8 or 9 months out, and say that, so they might have the money that they, you know, would be paying high interest on already sit in the bank account. And yes, I get it. It's for something else. And I understand being smart with your money, but there's also the thought process of, if you're going to be paying that interest to somebody else, what if you paid that interest to yourself? And so that's the reason that I wanted to put cash there, is because many times people have cash in a certain, you know, set aside account that they're not going to be using for longer than this transaction is going to take anyways. And there's the potential that that money could actually be working for them, you know, that way. And then traditional bank loans. Again, I know it's obvious, but for some people I see are completely overlooking it. You know, I know that the many people, their start into real estate is to simply buy a multifamily unit, live in one of the units, and then have the rest of it pay for, you know, their living. And Tim talked about that first house that he bought. You know, with that first house that he bought, it was not a duplex, but it was a traditional home that had a mother-in-law apartment. So his idea from the beginning was, I'm going to buy it traditionally, where I can get the best rates and I can get low down payment and all those things. And then I can turn around and I can rent out the basement, and I'm only going to be paying $50 a month to live in this house. And that's what he did. But then when he learned velocity banking, he was already in the best position possible to go ahead and turn that and flip that into a whole home HELOC. So there's things that you can do to structure yourself to, you know, turn long term. Now, traditional bank loans don't just fund owner occupied. So please understand that there is ways to do it owner occupied. And sometimes, you know, a husband and a wife can each have an owner occupied property. But you're going to have, you know, one of those units as your own unit for a period of time. And each bank is going to have a different requirement there to do that. But the other thing is, banks will do a second home purchase, which they don't necessarily require you to live in it. And there's not necessarily rules against renting it out. So sometimes you can do a second home loan, and again, you want to check the rules with your bank, with you know, as you're going through and you're talking to your mortgage broker, figure out what is the best loan for you. And I've found that sometimes on second home loans, they'll go as high on the loan to value, or close to as high on the loan to value as they will with a traditional home loan, right? And so that might be up to, you know, 90% of the value of the home or the purchase of the home. And the other thing to think about is they also have traditional bank loans for investment properties. Now, typically, about the highest loan to value that you're going to get there, or loan to purchase usually is what it really is about 80%. So usually with the bank, they're going to fund about 80% of your purchase price in a scenario like that. And then one last thing to think about when we're talking about the traditional bank loan here is, you know, if you're just getting started, I know that we teach against being the move-in guy, but if you're in a position where you're renting right now, right, you're in a position where you're not benefiting yourself, there's nothing wrong with going out there and buying a property. In fact, there's certain properties that you can get access to that are even on the MLS, you know, that you know, are bank owned and things of that nature, that you may be able to get access to simply because you're buying it as owner occupied you could fix it up over time, and you could turn around and you could end up with a large chunk of cash. I remember there was a kid within the community, Marvin, and Marvin did just that. He came in and he bought a property that was, kind of run down, and he moved into it and moved some buddies in there with him, and fixed it up over time. And he ended up within less than a year, he had over $90,000 in equity. So you just have to ask yourself, is it worth it, depending on your life situation, to live in a place that maybe is not completely remodeled, to do some of the work over time, and to end up with that big chunk of cash that, if you're working a traditional job, you could double or triple or, quadruple your income just simply by doing, one move-in type flip. Now, it's not something we recommend long-term as a strategy, but there is the idea there. There's also the idea of getting into a house that, maybe the upstairs is completely finished and it's ready for your house, for your family to live in, but you can fix the basement, or you can finish the basement over time and increase your equity. And if you're able to keep that as your personal residence for 3 out of 5 years, you could actually turn around, and when you sell it, there's huge tax benefits. So that's something to think about with the traditional bank loan. Now, hard money, Tim went into a little bit. In fact, if you guys are part of my team and you're here in Utah, I actually do have a lender that will lend more than the purchase price. In fact, he just lent on one of our deals. We bought the property for $110,000. He lent $170,000 on the deal because he's actually going off of the after repair value. Now, it is going to be dependent, though, on your experience. So the more experience you have, the more likely he's willing to lend.
Okay, Christion, what are the terms that he's giving, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, we got that at 2 and 12.
What?
Yeah, really good terms.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I need to contact you, man.
Yeah, and in fact, his so he'll go up to 70% of loan to value. So the
Value.
The long term
after. Oh wow. Okay, maybe I've got a deal I might be closing next week. I might need to talk to you about. Then.
Cool. I can introduce you to him, and it's kind of interesting. He made it out that he was the lender. But then once we got the loan, it turns out that he was really just shopping it out to some of his network. And so the loan actually went through a different company, but he's the one that lined it up. And, he got paid on, I'm sure, some of the points there. It might have been 3 points. It was either 2 or 3 points, but it was 12% interest. So it was really inexpensive for that type of a lending scenario. And so, yeah, I'm happy to make those connections. In fact, my hard money lenders love it when I send people their way. And I've got enough hard money lenders now that I have no scarcity there. I'm willing to always give those names out. I have multiple hard money lenders that you guys can contact that usually they start out at about 80% of loan to purchase, but that can go up over time based on your experience and based on how many deals you do with the lender.
Wow. Awesome. Here, and do you mind if I take over the credit cards here?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, you can just keep it there if you want to. So when it comes to credit cards, something that I did my first year, might even been my second year as well, was use credit cards. That first year I got access to probably 20,000+. And in fact, my third deal that I picked up, when Christion, I got this from a wholesale deal from Christion and Melissa. They had sent me a condo, and I had to close with like $10,000. Well, I got that money from credit cards actually. So even though I said I'll come in with cash, how I did that was the credit cards that I had received. They had sorry about that. They gave me some checks, and I just wrote them out to myself, deposited it to my bank account, and I was able to transfer. I was able to use that money to go and go to closing with and pick up those properties. Now they were like 0% interest for a shorter period of time, like 12 months, 18 months, something like that. So I wasn't in too big of a hurry. And the way that property cash flowed, that I knew that I was able to pay those off before they came due. And so when you're doing a strategy like that, that's something you got to keep in mind on. I know that there are some people that were told that when they want to purchase properties to use credit cards by kind of different education platforms that I've spoke to some friends and stuff who had a family member that went and did that, and they used credit cards to buy a bunch of rentals, and then all of a sudden now they were racked up with all the stuff that they could not pay off, and they just couldn't keep ahead of it, because rentals itself, just so you guys understand that you have so much equity, you have cash flow coming in, but you are still like illiquid, and so a lot of people call that like you are money poor, because you don't have a whole bunch of access to your money. You just have access to cash flow, and that's the cash flow is keeping you afloat month to month. So, and so just keep that in mind. When you're using credit cards, you still gotta be strategic. But that was the first way that I use credit cards to pay for my properties. And the method that some people use is that you can get. Now, this does also hurt your credit and stuff, but you can get multiple credit cards. You can apply for just more than 3, more than 5. You can get 15 different credit cards. You can go and give them a call once every few months and ask them if they can give you increases. And now as you go along, just understand that you're going to get, you absolutely want to watch the credit class, the advanced one as well as the beginner one, to kind of see how that works so you can make sure that you're structuring it correctly. I want, just so you know, when I got my credit cards, I went through Credit Nerds, GoFundMe, their website. I went through them twice. The first time, the first couple of years, and then a couple of years later, I wanted some more, and I wanted some business ones. They got me some business ones as well. And so right now I have access to over $100,000 worth of credit cards that I can use. But now I'm trying to do a different strategy where I'm switching it over, where instead of using my own personal credit, now I want to change more to have my business pay for my deals. Because one of the risks that you have with using credit cards is that when you're in when you're in the mode of utilizing your credit, and all of a sudden now you've got where you've used almost all of your credit to pick up properties, that you have. For me at least, I started feeling a lot of pressure because all my credit cards are maxed out. They were all being used. I had 5 deals going on, and I had, and then all of a sudden, like, something goes wrong where I have to pay more money towards the property, and so now I got to figure out where I'm going to get that money. And so I thought that I was okay, and then all of a sudden I was over leveraged. And so don't get yourself over leveraged, especially sometimes if people in 2008 over leveraged themselves at the wrong time, and ended up getting into, and all of a sudden property value is lost, and they ended up getting their credit, ended up like having all this credit card debt that they couldn't pay off. So you want to be strategic about it. You don't want to over leverage yourself with this credit card strategy, but know that it is just a short term to maybe a mid-term strategy with the 0% interest promotion part that you can take advantage of. But you need to be able to know that that's not your end means, that you can pick up whatever properties you want to just because of it. But it definitely does. It is definitely awesome in your repertoire. And
let me just add in there, Tim.
Right here. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that credit cards are a super useful tool, and so everybody should at least be getting access to them, even if they're not necessarily using them, because you want to have them for when things come up, right? And those credit cards can be super beneficial that way. In fact, when you have a scenario like we talked about before, where you just need to simply buy a property quickly and then turn around and refinance it, if you're doing it and you have enough limits on credit cards, which I think I'm up to like $150,000 in limits now. If you have those and you're not using them, there's a lot that can be done. And so you'll find and you'll learn as you go through your credit classes and whatnot, and then you start talking to people within the community ways of using those so that the bank sees that you're good with credit. And when you're good with credit, they want to give you more of it. So it's a strategy to start building over time.
Right, Christian. Do you want to take this auto loan? I think you have a good story about that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of people that have maybe paid off their loan, on their car, but, through a refinance or over time or whatever it is. And I mean, the thing about it is with auto loans, that is one of the most aggressive lending categories right now, is the auto loans. Now, I'm not talking about going to the big yellow signs where it says, title loans. We're talking about going into your bank or your credit union. And, oftentimes nowadays, there's banks that are lending up to like 150% of the value of the car. And they're giving it at very, very low rates. It's not going to be the lower payment like a 30-year loan on a house. It's typically a 5-year loan, but there are ways to essentially use money from a depreciating asset like a car to pick up an appreciating asset like a house. And when you can start thinking in the sense of shifting what your focus is, what your priority is, you stop prioritizing those things that are depreciating assets and start prioritizing those things that are appreciating assets.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and this next part. So thank you, Christian. And that's, I thought that was really cool too, Christian, how before when you said that you needed to come up with some money, that you you took whatever loans that you could, like on your motorcycle. Is that right? You had a motorcycle that you.
Yeah, so actually funding my education, that's part of when I first got started and I was funding my education. I took a loan against my car. I took a loan against my bullet bike. I raised the limit on a credit card, and I took out an unsecured loan. That was really high interest, but it was worth it to me because I knew that if I had this knowledge and I had this community behind me, that I could get out there and make it happen. But the same thing comes with real estate. Sometimes it's just that little bump that you need to get yourself into the deal or to get the deal done to turn around and get the larger profit.
Yeah, and banks are willing to lend to on auto or do auto loans for like 110% of a Kelley Blue Book or whatever they call that. Or
So
like
I haven't done it, so I can't verify.
yeah,
But I heard that there's some banks right now that are going up to 150% of the value of the car.
so it's a good way to find it. It's a secured loan. It's not too high. Sometimes it's not too high of a interest rate either. So that's definitely something to look at. So when it comes to so kind of switching gears, retirement accounts. That's sometimes what people feel like that's something they can't really tap into. There is an entire class on retirement accounts on the education that is over, over a full day of content on just that. I'm just going to lightly touch on it, but and you kind of see it there when it comes to retirement accounts. And I'll also put in there. Where did it go? Is it on a different line? Retirement accounts and HSA. Oh, on 20. Okay, gotcha. So retirement accounts and HSA accounts. We'll kind of put that together because it's kind of almost the same thing. So a lot of people with their employers have 401ks that have really good value. I know a couple people, well, a lot of people who have it, and when your 401ks, they are, you do need to talk to your employer, and all of them should give you access to borrow the money that you've put into it. And so up to $50,000 of what you personally put in. And so keep that in mind. And so, or half of what you put in up to 50,000 is kind of the way that it works. And usually the rates, what I've seen right now, is when I've looked on like my account, it's anywhere from 5, 7, 9% based on the amount of time that you want to lend it for, whether it be like a quick, like a year, 3-year, 5-year type of a time frame. And so 401ks, the type of properties you want to do with that one, you could do that with literally anything because it's such a good rate. You could use that for rehab money. You can use that for down payments on other properties, for short-term, long-term strategies. It's very universal what you could use it for. So when it comes to 401k, you just use like your own money. You can't really tap. And also, I mean, if you want to, so this is easy. Like it's not advanced strategy is what I'm going over. on the 401k. And on the IRA side, it gets more advanced. Now, the advanced strategy on the 401k side and the IRA side is that you go to a custodian that is willing to let you put properties in the name of the IRA, or to have your IRA own properties. And from then now you have full access to your 401k or your IRA money to buy the property. There are many rules. There are some rules that you want to make sure that you follow so that you are not doing a prohibited transaction. But as long as you do that, you can do amazing things with your retirement account, or with even other people's retirement account. In fact, this is a good way. I've found some good money just from telling people about this alone. And you also see other people's webinars and different presentations that various people in our community give, just over retirement accounts, on how you can purchase properties. One of the deals that I did last year was a friend. He lent me $50,000, which covered the rehab costs, as well as mainly covered the down payment on the property. To pick up a property that was subject to, but he wanted a good sizable down payment. And I picked it up from him, and I partnered with his IRA, and when we sold the property, his IRA benefited. And so that was a really great way, and then a really great way for him to build wealth.
And let me just add in here, Tim. I mean, so that class has probably been one of the most important classes of my entire career, the self-directed retirement accounts class. And I don't even have a retirement account myself. So in other words, because of that knowledge, I've been able to fund the majority of my deals using other people's retirement accounts. Some of those people were within the community, and they already, had the knowledge, but many of those people were outside of the community. And so because I had the knowledge, I was able to give them, some understanding of what was possible. And then they went and switched their retirement accounts over. And because of that, we were able to use that money. And oftentimes people in their retirement account are getting very low returns. And so if you negotiate well, you can get low rates from somebody by borrowing from their retirement account. And typically they don't need payments over time. Right? That money is just sitting there anyways. They've been taught that they can't touch it until a certain age. And so when you show them they can get access to it and they can grow it at a higher rate and be in control of their assets, it's just a huge thing to think about. So I want to put a huge plug for that class, because that class, again, has been one of the most important classes of my career in real estate. And I don't have a retirement account, but that's a big source of money. I think there's like $17 trillion or something like that that's out there in retirement accounts right now. So you just got to think that's where the money is. That's where America puts its money, and you can get access to it if you just have the knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try to get this headset because I want to stand up when it comes to talking about the B-lock. But when now I think a lot of people kind of know about the HELOC part, but just a second here, Christian, if you want to, actually.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing is, let's not talk about what people already know, because I want anybody that's watching this to at least get some value from each thing that we talk about here. So a home equity line of credit, just so you guys understand, that's a super useful tool when it comes to traditional financing. So a mortgage, when you have a mortgage, you're paying the same amount no matter what. And if you pay any additional to a mortgage, that money's gone. And typically in a mortgage, within those first 3 to 5 years, you're paying majority of your payment directly to interest. And so with a HELOC, typically what you can do is you can structure it to where you're paying those things off more quickly, and you can also get access to your capital. So some people say, well, I'm going to go refinance my house so that I can get access to the equity, so that I can have money to invest. But then they're paying interest on that immediately, and they may not be using that money until they find a deal. And we don't know if they're going to find a deal in a month or 6 months or 12 months down the line. But if they can go get a home equity line of credit, they're only paying on that money when they're using that money. And in fact, I'll just give the plug for John O'Neill. He used a business line of credit and a home equity line of credit to go out there and acquire a few different deals. One of which he actually split the lot off of the side of the home. So he split the lot off the side of the home. He funded it, utilizing these lines of credit. And then when he sold that lot, he made $92,000. So all of a sudden, he went from maxed out HELOC to being able to pay a huge chunk off. And if I understand correctly, John, from the time that he learned the velocity banking strategy to the time that he paid off his HELOC completely was about 3 years. So he went from, a big 30-year mortgage to paying it off in 3 years, because not just because he was making extra payments, but because he was out there and he was using that money to invest in properties that could pay big chunks of money. And so now John has this huge line of credit that he uses and pays off periodically based on where he's at in his investing career. So if you think about that for a second, if you guys were able to put yourself in that position, and let's say you had a $400,000 house and you've got a $350,000 HELOC, and all of a sudden, things hit the fan and you just aren't making the money that you were supposed to, or you had a big life change and you have you got to spend all your time at the hospital with your family member. You just created this big safety net for yourself. So again, home equity line of credit, I want to put a big plug in for that, that type of tool, because there's a lot that can be done with a home equity line of credit.
Yeah, and so going on with that, that line of credit in terms of the HELOCs, that's actually most of the ways. Like, again, there are two full-day courses on the education that talk about the HELOC part, and or the home equity line of credits, or it's actually called velocity banking. And so helping people understand that will also help you be able to raise a lot of money. I picked up a fourplex. In fact, because I refinanced my home, my first home that I lived in, I was able to buy the property that I'm in now, the 3,000 square foot, 5-bedroom home that I'm in. That I'm able to, my wife and kids are able to have more room to play and to live in, as well as purchase a fourplex that I had downtown, and so payment for the fourplex that I picked up, and so it's a very powerful method with very cheap money. But again, it's got a time limit on it, so you have to work on that. And one of the things I want to talk about when it comes to BLOCs, BLOC, a business line of credit, those are, I would call the holy grail of lines of credit, because you could be business lines of credits don't show up on your own personal credit. So if you get a line of credit from banks, and I'll talk a little bit about how to do that, then those are not like the balances are not going to show up on your personal line of credit, which is great, because you could still be a regular person. You could have good credit, work on that, work on your credit. Purchase your cars with your credit. Do whatever you need to do with your personal credit, and it won't affect your business lines of credit. And your business lines of credit could be racked up to the max, and it won't show up. So that's what I love about them. I've got a couple right now, and they are credit cards for my business. When it comes to now, in terms of how to build that, what I currently am working on is I'm working with a kind of a third party here, but I'm working on building actual anywhere from $500,000 or more of lines of credit for business alone, and it's really it's quite a revolutionary. Anyways, it's really cool. It blows my mind, and I'm building it. If you have questions about how to what I'm doing and stuff, and I'll give you updates on it. Or I'll connect you to the person that's helping me with it if you'd like. But basically, what I'm doing is I'm trying to clean up my own personal credit so it looks great, it looks immaculate. My profile, in other words, like my names match among all the creditors that I'm with, and all the credit bureaus make sure that I have the correct name, which is Timothy A. Vreeland. It's your first name, first full name, middle initial, last name, and then make sure that your address is also matched on all your creditors, whoever you have credit lines with, open credit lines with. Make sure that they have your correct address on file, and the correct address is what the United States Post Office has. All you need to do is just go to them and or go to the website. You can type it in. They can give you your exact address. So if you have like an apartment building and you put in the address, it's not apartment period. If it says number 15 or whatever, if it's your apartment, then you need to put in the number sign 15 on every single application. And the reason for that is because when you're applying for these loans, you want to apply for these loans in a way where the bank is willing to give this to you, not like a no doc, meaning you don't have to go and give them your tax returns, your assets and your portfolio and all sorts of things. So you don't have to do any of that. Just have them do like an auto, like an what do you call it? An auto accept or a auto, I guess, yeah, an auto approval. To do that, first of all, you need to make sure like 80% of you getting those lines is making sure that your profile is immaculate. They want to see Timothy A. Vreeland, and they don't want to see multiple names, because to see multiple names, then that could be multiple people. So they want to make sure that you are who you say you are and it's not somebody else. And so if you can clean that up so your profile just has one name amongst all creditors, your goal, yeah, that's one of the biggest things. As well as make sure that your lines of credit, in terms of like all your credit cards, debt. In fact, I have a whole bunch of credit cards, but now I'm trying to work towards kind of getting cutting off a couple of them, so that it doesn't show me as being too much, having too much access to personal lines of credit. Again, this is not something you just want to do right away. You got to make sure your business is making money, and you got to show that you're doing that. So part of the tips is because make sure that you want to have anywhere between 3 to 5 access to 3 to 5 cards from tier 1 lenders. Tier 1 lenders are like Chase Bank, Bank of America, or a name of a couple. And then also, here's kind of the funny thing, because we were in the business of doing real estate, but for the banks to do an auto, like an auto approval, they don't want to have the name real estate, or have real estate in the name, nor have that entity have any real estate in the property. They also don't want to have to do with any funding or anything to do with like money lending or any type of like a holdings type of a thing. So what I did was I purchased a shell company. That's a 3-year-old shell company. I paid over $1,000 for it, and I'm making it so that is a consulting company, and now my consulting company is the one giving advice to my businesses. And so it's not owning, it doesn't do the transaction, it consults the business that's doing the transaction. So my business Future for You is consulting Vreeland Real Estate on doing the transactions. And then when I get paid, I paid my business. Even if it's me, I'm giving advice to myself. Or when I do marketing, I consider that consulting, or more part of like a consulting fee, marketing fee. And so that'll go into the business. And so that'll be the one making the money. There's a lot more into that, but as soon as you build the right profile, you go to businesses and you apply for these loans, you get those auto, you work with like 3 to 5 different banks, those grow. And then at the beginning phase, you're going to be growing those, as you work with those companies, or as you work with those businesses, those banks. Those banks are willing to, they're willing to give you, let's say at the beginning, they give you $10,000 each or $20,000 each. And then as time goes, as you don't use it very much, you grow it, and then eventually that becomes, hopefully within about 6 months to 2 years, that'll go between $500,000 to $2 million. And so that's kind of what I'm working on. I'm still in the make sure my profile is picture perfect phase, and then I'll be growing into the scouting out for banks, and then opening up bank accounts, and then running cash through those in a structured way and things like that. It's really it's very revolutionary. I'm really excited about it. But once I get to that, once I have those all opened up and where I want them to be, then I don't have to worry about lending. A lot of these other methods. It'd be easier just write a check and buy a home. And the fees are also really cheap, because the interest rates are around 9% interest. It's whatever prime is right now plus a couple points. So I'm really excited about that, the B locks. And so that's it for that I want to talk about. There's a few other things here. We kind of know about life insurance policies. or not we. Sorry, I keep on saying that, but you can also borrow from life insurance. So if anybody has any policies, or yourself, that I don't know, you could also, if you know you have life insurance, you can always call your life insurance company and say, hey, listen, do I have a cash value? And if you do, you can ask, oh, well, I'd like to borrow from that. And then have them tell you about how to do that and what you need to do, whether you need to send in paperwork, what their interest rates are. But you can borrow. But some people have access to that, and some people have family members or friends that have access to that, where you can borrow from that, give them a good rate of return, and they don't have to pay that back. They just do the life insurance, but their life insurance, like whatever your payments are, as long as you keep up with the, or it's going to be, they're going to charge you, and then and then like your balance, something like that, is going to go down. Anyways, it's really awesome. And there's actually also a class about in the education about how to borrow from life insurance, or how to borrow from life insurance policies. And so I really love those. When it comes to banks, there are numbers 10 and 11 here: signature lines of credit and secure lines of credit. That's just basically like business lines of credit, where instead of it's a business, though, it's off of you. And so banks are willing to give you also one of those, just it's not a credit card, but it's actually a line of credit that you could just borrow from whenever you want to. So you can go and apply for those at whatever banks. Any banks that you'd like to go to, maybe a bank that you've had a good relationship with. And as time goes on, as you're not using it, or as you're using it well, that they're going to increase it. Where I've seen some people who have over $100,000 worth of a signature or personal line of credit. And the difference between a per-signature and a secure line of credit is, a secure line of credit is that the bank requires you to put down money first. So if you want to get, let's say, if you're just starting, and you want to borrow $1,000 from the bank, they're going to ask for you for $500 down first, and then they'll give you $1,000 worth of credit, and then worth of line, and then you're going to be able to use that. And then if you wanted to use more, you can put down a lot more. So if you put down 5,000, they'll give you 10,000, or if you put down 10,000, they give you 20,000, or however much they feel, 40,000, or whatever their ratio of money towards lending power they're willing to give to you. So that way, most the reasons why banks would give you, or require you to do a secure line of credit versus a signature line of credit is based on your personal credit, actually. And so if you don't seem too reliable, then they're going to want a little bit of skin, or a little bit of money from you, in order for them to open up their wallets to you, especially because it's unsecure. I mean, it's secured against the money that you have, that you kind of put into the account, but they can't go after you for more. So that's kind of a little why it's a little bit more risky for them. So that'll finish our column over there. Now, when it comes to family and friends, and also kind of put in a networking event, so people that you've business partners. So when it comes to this, family and friends, when you come up to them, and this is one of the main methods that I use to raise money for whatever business ventures that I have going on, so I talk to them, and based on how much money I think I can make, based on the relationships, based on what I have going on, I can decide whether I want to bring on money just to do it as a debt relationship, or an equity relationship. Debt versus equity means that I'm borrowing money and I'm paying payments on the debts that somebody, or you're paying the loan that somebody is doing, it whether it be monthly, annually, or at the end of the deal, whatever it is. Equity means that they own an equity share in I guess you could say either the company or the transaction, so that when we sell, that they get a portion of the profits. So that I usually will do equity on long-term transactions, and debt on more short-term transactions. I also kind of look at the the risk of the transaction that I have going on. So if it's a very risky transaction, or if I, if the person that I'm bringing on is not a seasoned investor, I want to make sure that I protect any of my friends or family or parties that I have going to be involved. That I want to make sure that they have a great experience. And so if I say, listen, I'm going to borrow your money, and in 6 months' time, I'll give it to you back. I'll give you 10% flat fee. I've done that before, or I'll give you 12% or 12 points, 12% and 2 points, and then I go in at the end of the transaction. They get their 2 points. They have their 12% annual, and everybody's happy, and that's great. Well, I've had some deals where if I do equity, that and especially when it's a kind of or I work with brand new investors, or I'll mainly also do equity if somebody brings me the transaction and then we partner and we have a good experience. I want to make sure that everybody has a good experience, and so I try to when it comes to my own personal deals. I'll do what I can to try to do it with debt, and then based on the things I might bring in equity as well. But the biggest when it comes to doing a transaction, whoever owns the asset is the one who takes on the most risk. And sometimes, like, I've done deals where I've made amazing, a 6-figure money or high mid-figure 5-figure monies, and somewhere I've actually a couple properties where I've actually made negative, and the negative ones don't feel good. And if it's like somebody's first and it's a negative deal, I've taken on said, you know what, I'm not sharing the downside here. I'll just take it. And I'm kind of tired of having to be a nice guy and do that. And so I don't want to, when it comes to new investors, and I want to make sure that they have a good time, or at least a good experience. What's a better experience than being in a debt position where you're getting a higher percent than you can get anywhere else? And so I give them that experience, and then I help them say, like, this is how I'm doing deals, as I'm doing things. I'm giving them their money, and then at the end, eventually they'll start finding their own deals, and then they'll start. And then on my side is, if I make money, I make great money. This last deal that I did, that I closed in Midvale, I actually ended up making about $2,500. Now, if I would have partnered with somebody, let's say who came in, like, if I would have partnered with somebody, let's say the person who came in with $100,000 to help me close this transaction, they made good money. I put them in a debt position. Oh, they made great money. They made about $10,000 roughly. I made $2,500. If we would have partnered, they would have made less money. They would have made maybe $7,500, and I would have made $7,500. If you take 6,000, sorry, we would have made probably $6,000 a piece, because I would have made more money in that point. But they were a new investor to me, and I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. That's if we did a 50-50 kind of a split. So even though I didn't make much money, if that was an equity blend mixed, I would have made more money. But then the other side, Barbara would have not have had such a good experience. And I'm okay, because I've done enough deals where I'm okay making a little bit. I do more. It's all about volume. It's about keeping them going. And when you do those, when you're borrowing money from somebody, you need to make sure you have a note in place, and also make sure that it's secured on the property. And I have some, if you wanted to know what some of my notes look like, I'm happy to share them with you. And you can just reach out to me on Facebook if you want to, or whatever, if you wanted to kind of get some of my examples of kind of what I've used. And so that's that one. And two other ones that I'll talk about, and I'll leave with Christion to kind of talk about a few of these. Other great places to come up with money to purchase properties is attending networking events. Going to the Renatus or local meetings here is a great way to network, because a lot of people there, they want to do deals. Some people have money, some people have deals, and so that's where you blend together and you're able to get a lot of deals done. I did multiple transactions because of just showing up to the meeting and being somebody that can plug in and do it. Or I have a deal coming up and I was able to partner with somebody and they were able to do it. They were able to close in that thing. But go in and meet new people and ask and tell them what you do and ask them what they do. And you can always ask them, like, hey, do you have access to money? And and different things, and just talk about it beforehand so that you know that when you do have a deal, you know who to call right when that comes in. So that was network events. So when it comes to social media is a really it's a really good tool. This is kind of funny, and I don't know if it's compliant anymore, but at the beginning of let's say the first couple of years of me doing investing, when I would ask for people's money, I would I I would just send a big Facebook message and say, hey, a Facebook message, and say, hey, I'm trying to do a transaction. Anybody want to make a quick 10%? And some people, I actually found money from just asking people, hey, who's got money? And I just say, hey, this is the transaction. Let me know if you're interested, and then I send them the interest. But a better way.
And I'll just add in here, Tim. You can still, essentially put it out there to your network on Facebook, but I wouldn't offer any type of, percentage up front, because that could be looked at as like a public offering. And so,
Right.
It's more so, hey, I've got a deal with great profit potential, looking for somebody that potentially wants to lend on the transaction as a private lender. No problems there.
Yeah. Thank you. I was hoping you're going to chime in, actually. All right. So if you do plan on doing something like that, then yeah, you don't want to post anything about any numbers or anything specific, because then you might be having to deal with the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, and stuff like that. And so or get some fines from that. So don't do that. So we're all about staying out of trouble. We're all about doing things the right way. And so keep that in mind. Now, one of the ways on social media, if you go back to my previous webinar when you talked about how to find properties, when all you're doing is just telling people what you do. Just saying, hey, listen, I'm looking for properties. Do you know anybody who's in such and such situation? And sometimes you'll get three different things. You can turn that person, whoever responds to you, might turn into one of three things. They might say, you know what? Actually, one of four things, but you know what? I do know somebody, or I'm going in that transaction. So maybe they have the deal. Another person might be, you know what? I don't know anybody, but I'm interested in seeing what you can do, and I've got money. So sometimes they might tell you they got money to help you out. Or number three, they might say, you know what? I don't, but I'm interested in knowing what you do. Can you, I want to learn what you do. And so all of a sudden they become a marketing lead. They want to know more. Then you introduce them to Renatus. Or number four, they don't answer, or they just say, please don't answer me that again. Yeah, just put them on the no side. It's fine. So those four things. So social media, just reaching out to your people, to your friends, is a definitely good way also to find money in that respect. And Christion says this thing in here, says a loan management account. Christion, can you talk about that?
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into detail because I'm definitely not the expert in it, but a loan management account is essentially, there's a tool out there where you can have your money invested into bonds, and it can actually be in stocks as well, but typically the best scenario here from what I hear and the little I understand about it is, and we have a couple of guys that are more experts that we can introduce you to within the group, but essentially you get into high yielding bonds. So you have kind of a guaranteed rate of return on that money, but then you can borrow against it. So it's very similar to like a life insurance policy, except that money is a little bit more, liquid in the sense that it's, you can cash out those stocks or bonds at certain times. But anyways, it's basically a way to double dip with your money. So with life insurance, if you guys understand, you can have the life insurance policy, you can have the death benefit, and you can be getting, you can actually be earning interest on your life insurance and then take a loan against it. And usually that loan against it, is at a somewhat low interest rate as well. In fact, you might even be earning more in the life insurance policy than what you're borrowing it from yourself at. And so this loan management account is very similar in that sense. And there's a couple of guys within the group that have been using this to where they may have a high net worth individual. They've done it themselves, but they also are using it to fund their deals through other people, because these people have money and they're saying, I'll tell you what, let's use that money multiple times. You can have your money always earning interest, but then every time I use it, we just take a loan against that loan management account and we put that money to work in a higher yield. And so it's a way, sometimes if you're, for example, you have your money and you're lending it out on transactions. Well, if you're lending it out at 12%, but because you're not able to constantly keep it in the flow, you're getting 0% when it's not working. And let's say that's, 3 or 4 months out of the year, all of a sudden your actual yearly rate of return, your annual rate of return goes way down, right? You're actually only earning 8 or 10%. So this is a way that you can earn a certain percentage rate, and then you can borrow against that money to fund deals at a higher interest rate. And essentially you're just keeping that money working more effectively. So there's a lot to look into with it, and it does take a certain net worth and a certain amount of money in order to do something of that nature. But it can be a very useful tool.
Yeah, that's a good point. And do you mind talking about these other ones right here, Christion?
Sure, not a problem. So when you're thinking about funding a deal, oftentimes many people overlook the fact that, the person who owns the deal sometimes can be your best source of money. In fact, oftentimes they'll finance it at very low rates. I've had people finance deals to me with 100% of the financing, meaning I don't even have to come out of pocket. Oftentimes that's a distressed situation, but sometimes it's just I'm willing to offer them more than what they're going to get elsewhere. And so they know they're going to get their money in a certain period of time anyways, and I'm going to be the one that is improving that property, right? So owner financing overall is something that, that can be used. In fact, oftentimes what I've seen is a strategy where, let's say, somebody, or you contact somebody that owns their property free and clear, and they want more than what the property's worth. Now, typically, somebody would walk away from that deal, right? We're investors. We're not going to pay more than something's worth. But if you could get that property and you could pay them more than it's worth, but have them give it to you at 0% interest and allow you to pay it off over 5 or 10 or 20 years, now all of a sudden, the actual amount that you're buying at, your actual net, let's call it, in the end, if you're paying them payments over time, could be a lot less than if you financed it traditionally. So you could actually make up what you would be paying the banks by just paying them directly and not being charged the interest. So that's one thing with owner financing, is there's a lot of creativity that you can get into. And it's the whole thing that, in real estate, I've learned this from the very beginning. Even the first, programs that I started taking, they always talked about how, when you're negotiating, if they want their price, you get your terms. If they want their terms, you get your price. So in other words, if they want a certain price, then you can negotiate terms that even out to make the deal worth your while. Meaning, maybe you pay them more than it's worth, but you get a very low payment and they finance it for you for 30 years, to where ultimately with that low payment and no interest or low interest, you could pay it off much faster than a traditional way. If they want cash, if they want their terms, meaning they want to be cashed out, and they want to be cashed out in the next 5 days, well, then obviously you have to get your price. And so owner financing, super beneficial, and something to think about anytime you're negotiating on a deal. And sometimes they might have a mortgage that's already in place, and especially if you're dealing with distressed sellers. And so many of the deals that I have bought, we actually bought it subject to the existing financing staying in place. So they owner financed it to us, even though it wasn't their money, it was the bank's money, right? So you're using their mortgage to fund your deal, essentially. And you don't have to go to the bank. You don't have to qualify for those types of a thing. And I've even, done it where we took it over subject to, but they also had equity. So they were financing their equity in addition to the mortgage, but they were paid out on the back end. And sometimes that can be a longer term transaction. We actually did a commercial property this way, where we structured it, and kind of a crazy story. I don't want to go too much on a side note, but the guy who sold it to us died while we were still making payments, and we paid on it for another 1.5 years even though it was his mortgage and he had passed away. And then when we paid it off, when we actually sold the property, then that money went to his estate. And so his sister, who was dealing with his estate, is the one that we were dealing with for that last year and a half. So there's some things that can be done there where you can actually owner finance, even if they have a mortgage on the property. Going through down to a credit partner, sometimes there's a deal that's it's worth doing, but you might not have the ability to qualify. And so building relationships with people that have the credit, that have the income, oftentimes can be a way that you can give somebody the benefit of getting into real estate without them having to have the knowledge and the expertise that you do. And so we've done this sometimes even as a secondary exit strategy where, the flip doesn't go as we expected. It's not selling on the open market, but the value is there. We turn around and get a credit partner, and this credit partner comes in and buys it. And sometimes there's creative ways where you can structure it to where your credit partner brings in the money, but the money comes right back to them because they're buying it from you. And then automatically it's going into a partnership. So some creative things that you can do there in having people. And the thing you have to think about with credit partners is not only do they need to have good credit, but they're also going to need to have the proof of income. They're going to need to be able to show that they can qualify for it. And so when I mentioned earlier on the traditional bank loans, sometimes you can have a husband and a wife and they each get a mortgage separately. Sometimes this credit partner, that's a scenario that could work there. HSA is going to be a health savings account. So there's some really cool things that you can do to fund and essentially create yourself an insurance policy, right? This is like self-insuring against medical situations. And with a health savings account, you can actually grow that money tax-free so that you can get the money into your health savings account and then you can grow it just like a retirement account tax-free. So if you, for example, had $5,000 in your health savings account and you went and put that on an option on a piece of land, and then you turn around and sell that option for $150,000. Well, guess what? You just put that $150,000 into your HSA tax-free. Now that money has to be used for certain things, right? It has to be used for, health type stuff, but even, toothpaste and, many other things can be bought through your HSA. And again, you're creating for yourself an insurance policy. In fact, within your HSA, there's ways to actually pay for high deductible health insurance as well. So you're covering for the majors without having to pay the large amounts that some people pay for health insurance. And then the last thing that we'll cover, because I know we are over the top of the hour, is when you start thinking about this, start thinking big. Folks, there's going to get to the point in time where you may want to be doing deals that are much bigger than you can fund on your own, or you can fund with just one private money lender or hard money lender. And so as you start growing this big, and you might be wanting to fund deals that are multiple millions of dollars, maybe even tens of millions of dollars, typically you're going to put together some type of a syndicate or a fund. And that's when you're pooling multiple people together. They're putting their money in for a rate of return or for a share in the deal. And we actually have a couple of full day classes on this alone. Don't go do this without understanding how to do it properly. This is how people get hurt. This is how people end up in trouble. Oftentimes you may think that you're just bringing people together and you're just using their money, and you never want in the beginning to start collecting money without attaching it to a deal from the get-go. I'm going to tell you that right now, because that's how Ponzi schemes start, folks. And you don't want to be the person who thought you were doing something right and then got in over your head and you're trying to make it up somehow. And all of a sudden you have the SEC breathing down your neck, right? So when you talk about creating a syndicate or a fund, this is going to be more of an advanced strategy. And you want to jump into your classes and you want to make sure you have all the proper documentation, all the proper paperwork. And you also want to make sure that you're only allowing people that are able to put money into your type of syndicate or fund, which there's many different types, in. So sometimes you'll have to use only accredited investors. Sometimes you'll have a minimum amount of uncredited, or a maximum amount, I should say, of unaccredited investors, and everybody after that has to be accredited investors. Sometimes there's a limit on how much money an unaccredited investor can put in. So again, I'm just throwing out some basics on this so you understand that there's so much more to learn when you get into the big boys or big girls game, so to speak, and you're creating a syndicate or a fund. That's when you want to make sure. I guess that's not when, because from the very beginning, you want to make sure that you have everything documented properly and you're being smart about it and you have the right, the right protection in place. But it becomes a whole new level when you start pooling funds together. So, Tim, that covers the list. Is there any final comments that you wanted to add before we end today's webinar?
Man, well, I'll tell you, I feel like almost each one of these points can be probably a full webinar, and it would take half a year to go through all these. 20, 52 weeks in a year. There's 20, almost half a year. So life insurance would have its own thing. The whole business line of credit, that could be a whole hour. HSAs, using retirement accounts. And so we really just briefly went through these, and a lot of these, almost at least half of these have Renald's classes to go with it too. So there's a lot to learn. What we're trying to do, and what me and Christion were hoping to do with this whole webinar today, was to help expand people's minds to seeing what money they didn't realize they had access to, as well as what they can do in order to fund these deals instead of saying no. There's a lot of my friends that I talk to who haven't done any real estate deals, who haven't done any real estate ever. When I ask them, when they say, "Oh, I wish I could do real estate. I just wish I had money," almost every single one of them has said, "Well, if I had the money that you do," and I kind of chuckle. They just don't have the knowledge that I do in terms of how to get these and how to get these correctly, how to get the money. And so thank you so much for jumping on the line and for watching this class. And if any questions that you have about these, and like Christion said, if you have questions about getting access to this, reach out to me, reach out to Christion, and we'll get you going. Okay, guys, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for jumping on.
And we will upload the recording for this, folks. So if you guys are watching the recording, you can actually, if you're in our private Facebook group, you can simply comment your questions into that group, because if you have the question, somebody else likely does too. And we want to make sure that we answer that either through the group or on a future webinar.
Right. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for jumping on. Thanks, Sandra.